Hello and welcome back to the channel. You are about to dive into part 2 of our gripping audiobook, Luna Chooses the Pack Healer Over Her Crippled Alpha. If you are new here and haven't listened to the first 6 chapters, I highly recommend you hit pause and go back to watch part 1 first. The story is full of shocking betrayals, and you won't want to miss out. The link is waiting for you in the description below. For our amazing returning listeners, if you haven't already, please make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another chapter of our thrilling werewolf romance stories. Now, for everyone who has been waiting on that devastating cliffhanger, Aspen's web of lies has been torn apart by her own daughter, and the consequences are just beginning. Let's get back to the story. Chapter 7. Willow's words detonated the silence, and the world I knew turned to ash and ruin. There was no recovery, no way to respin the narrative. The truth, raw and ugly, was out, spoken from the one pure soul in the room. In that moment, I saw the shift in Elder Rowan's eyes, the last glimmer of sympathy hardening into contempt. I saw the shock on Silas's face curdle into a deep, personal hurt. But worst of all, I saw the flicker of something in Ryker's cold gaze. Vindication. He had suspected the worst of me, and my own daughter had just confirmed it. The turmoil that followed was a quiet, brutal storm. I wasn't put in chains or formally exiled. The punishment was far more intimate, more suffocating. I was branded a traitor, not for a crime of the flesh, but for a crime of the heart, for abandoning my Alpha, our Alpha, in his darkest hour. In a swift and silent decree from Elder Rowan, which Ryker did not contest, I was stripped of my Luna duties. My seat on the council was removed. The pack mothers who once sought my counsel now turned their backs when I entered a room. I was an outcast in my own home, a ghost haunting the life I had destroyed. Even Silas was not spared. He was the healer, respected and vital, so they could not cast him out. Instead, they poisoned his reputation with whispers. They saw his kindness to me not as a virtue, but as a weakness, an ambition, a betrayal of his duty to his Alpha. Warriors would enter the infirmary and stare at him with suspicion, second-guessing his remedies. He who had only ever offered comfort was now paying the price for mine. I tried to justify my actions to myself and to the few who would listen. "You don't understand what it was like," I'd say, my voice raw with a self-pity no one wanted to hear. He was a wall of ice. He pushed me away. But my words were hollow. They saw only a crippled Alpha and a Luna who had found comfort in the arms of another man while her daughter wept alone. I was truly, utterly alone, alienated from my mate, my daughter, and the man who had been my only solace. The infirmary was no longer a sanctuary. My presence there now only brought shame upon Silas. The great hall was a chamber of judgment. My own chambers were a cold, silent prison. One night, desperate and broken, I went to Ryker's study. I needed to explain, to make him see the truth of his own cruelty, the truth of my loneliness. I found him staring into the fire, a thick fur blanket over his useless legs. "Ryker," I started, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't turn. "I have nothing to say to you, Aspen." It wasn't what they think," I stammered, the words feeling weak and pathetic even to my own ears. "Silas was just a friend." He finally turned his head, and his face was not filled with rage. It was worse. It was completely devoid of any emotion at all. It was the face of a man looking at a stranger who disgusted him. "A friend?" he repeated, his voice flat and dead. "My own daughter saw you choosing him over her, over me. You didn't just seek comfort, Aspen. You sought a replacement." He turned back to the fire. "Get out." His cold certainty was more painful than any shouted accusation. As I backed away, my heart a hollow, aching void, a commotion from the pack's main gate reached the room, raised voices, the hurried footsteps of sentinels. A few moments later, Jackson, his beta, burst into the study, his eyes wide with an urgency that momentarily eclipsed our private war. "Alpha!" he panted, his gaze flicking nervously between me and Ryker. "A delegation has arrived, unannounced. It's the shamans from the Red Mountain Order." Chapter 8. Jackson's urgent announcement about the Red Mountain shamans sent a ripple of shock through the room, a force that momentarily suspended even Ryker's cold fury. The shamans were legends, a nomadic order of mystics who answered to no alpha and walked the spirit paths. They had not been seen in our territory for generations. To have them arrive unannounced was an omen, though whether for good or ill, no one could say. I faded back into the shadows of the study as Ryker commanded Jackson to escort them in, my outcast status making me nothing more than a piece of furniture in the room. The shaman who entered was not what I expected. He was lean and weathered, his face a map of ancient wisdom, and he moved with a silent grace that was utterly captivating. He introduced himself as Malachi. He was not accompanied by a warrior guard, but by the quiet power of his own presence. "Alpha Ryker," Malachi said, his voice like stones grinding together, ancient and deep. He gave a respectful bow. "News of your sacrifice has traveled on the spirit winds. To save a pup at the cost of your own wolf, it is a feat of honor that has not been seen since the age of the first alphas. I have come to pay my respects." Ryker inclined his head, a gesture of regal acknowledgement from his wheelchair. "Your respect is welcome, shaman. Our pack is honored." Malachi's gaze swept the room, passing over me without a flicker of recognition, before landing back on Ryker. "If I may be so bold, Alpha, an injury of this magnitude, one that can sever the spirit from the wolf, I have not seen its like. Would you permit me to examine the wound?" A tense silence fell. Ryker hated anyone seeing his weakness, his brokenness, but to refuse a shaman of the Red Mountain Order was an insult he could not afford. With a curt nod, he gave his consent. I watched from the shadows, my heart pounding as Malachi knelt before Ryker's chair. He didn't touch him. Instead, he closed his eyes and began to chant, a low, guttural hum that vibrated through the floorboards. A faint, ethereal light began to glow around his hands. He passed them slowly over Ryker's legs and back, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then his eyes snapped open. The respectful calm was gone, replaced by a look of profound shock and dawning fury. "This is no ordinary wound," Malachi breathed, his eyes fixed on Ryker's spine. "Silver poisons the flesh, yes, but this has poisoned his spirit." He looked up, his gaze locking with Ryker's. This was an act of malice. This was no silver trap meant for a rogue. My blood ran cold. "This is a curse," the shaman declared, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. The healer's diagnosis was wrong. He saw only the wound but failed to see the venom that is coiled around your soul. A collective gasp went through the room. Ryker's hands gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles turning white. For the first time in months, I saw a flicker of something other than rage in his eyes. It was a wild, desperate hope. "The curse was designed to sever your bond, yes," Malachi continued, his voice rising with a righteous anger. "But it was also designed to feed on your despair, to grow stronger with your bitterness. It has been slowly killing you from the inside out." He stood, his presence filling the room with an ancient power. "A curse," Ryker rasped, the word a mix of disbelief and dawning understanding. "Can it be broken?" Malachi held his gaze, and his next words were a promise and a challenge, a glimmer of hope that was more terrifying than any threat. "The curse can be broken," the shaman announced, his voice echoing in the stunned silence. "Your wolf is not gone, Alpha. He is merely caged." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle before delivering the final devastating blow. "But the ritual to free him is complex and dangerous. and it requires a sacrifice. Chapter 9. The shaman's word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Sacrifice. The word itself felt like a judgment, a price I knew, deep down, I was no longer willing to pay for the man Ryker had become. Before my mate could even respond to the shaman's proclamation, the sound of commotion from the main gate echoed through the keep, a sentry's urgent call, followed by the heavy, coordinated tread of many paws. Jackson burst back into the study, his face pale. "Alpha!" he stammered, his eyes wide. "A grand delegation has arrived. It is Alpha Orion of the Sunstone Pack. He is requesting an audience." A stunned silence fell over our council members. Alpha Orion was a legend, powerful, proud, and notoriously reclusive. His pack controlled the rich, mineral-heavy mountains to the east. For him to come here, in person, was an unprecedented event. Ryker's jaw tightened, and he gave a curt nod. "Let him enter." I retreated further into the shadows as Alpha Orion swept into the room. He was everything my mate was not. Whole, vibrant, radiating a raw power that demanded respect. He was flanked by two of his most powerful warriors, and his gaze, sharp and assessing, took in the entire room before landing on the man in the wheelchair. He walked directly to Ryker, his expression unreadable, and then, to the shock of everyone, he lowered his head in a gesture of profound respect. "Alpha Ryker!" Orion's voice boomed, rich and powerful. "I have come to repay a debt." Ryker's eyes narrowed. "I know of no debt between our packs, Orion." "But there is," Orion insisted. He gestured to one of his warriors who stepped forward. Beside him was a small, dark-haired pup. My breath caught in my throat. It was the pup from the trap. Orion placed a hand on the young wolf's shoulder. "You did not just save a pup from a silver trap, Ryker. You saved my daughter, my only heir." The revelation hit the room like a physical force. "My scouts informed me of the trap's location," Orion continued, his voice hardening. "It was not set by rogues. It was a declaration of war from a rival clan, an assassination attempt on my bloodline. Your heroic act at the cost of your own wolf did not just save my daughter's life. It prevented a catastrophic war that would have drowned this entire region in blood." He took a step closer, his eyes burning with sincerity. "A debt of honor must be repaid. The Sunstone Pact does not forget its allies." He unfurled a large scroll, its seal bearing his pack's crest. "As a reward for your sacrifice, and as a symbol of our eternal gratitude, I gift your pack the territory of the Sunstone Ridge and all the veins of silver and gold that run through its heart." A collective gasp went through the room. That territory was legendarily rich, enough to make our pack wealthy beyond imagination. "Furthermore," Orion declared, his voice rising, "I pledge to you, here and now, a permanent, unbreakable military alliance. My warriors are your warriors. My strength is your strength. An attack on your pack will be an attack on mine." The room erupted. In a single moment, Ryker, the broken alpha I had pitied and abandoned, had become the leader of one of the wealthiest, most secure, and most powerful packs in the entire nation. I watched from the shadows, a cold, sickening dread coiling in my stomach. The man I had deemed incomplete, the leader whose future I had written off, was now more powerful in his wheelchair than he had ever been on his own 2 feet. I had made a catastrophic mistake. As the celebration began to quiet, the shaman Malachi stepped forward once more, his presence cutting through the excitement. He looked at Ryker, his ancient eyes seeming to see the newfound wealth and power as nothing more than a passing breeze. "The spirits have rewarded your honor, Alpha," Malachi said, his voice a low hum that commanded attention. "But they have not forgotten the price of your healing." He paused, his gaze flicking for just a moment to me, a look so sharp and knowing it felt as though he had stripped my soul bare. "The curse is anchored to your spirit," the shaman stated, his eyes returning to Ryker. "To break such a chain, The ritual requires the willing sacrifice of the thing most precious to a wolf's soul, the unwavering, absolute loyalty of a true mate's bond. Chapter 10. The shaman's final words landed like a death blow. The unwavering, absolute loyalty of a true mate's bond, my bond. A bond I had already betrayed in every way but physically, a bond that was now tarnished, frayed, and worthless. A cold, humiliating silence descended as every wolf in the room turned to look at me, their outcast Luna. The sacrifice required for my mate's healing was the one thing I no longer had to give. Ryker's face was a mask of stone, but I saw the last flicker of hope in his eyes die, extinguished by the truth of my disloyalty. But Alpha Orion, ever the pragmatist, stepped forward. "The shaman speaks of a sacrifice of spirit," he declared, his voice cutting through the tension. "Perhaps the bond is not the only anchor. My own daughter, a wolf of pure heart and noble blood, owes Alpha Ryker her life. She will stand in for the Luna. She will offer her loyalty, a life debt paid in full, to the rituals." It was a political masterstroke, an offer that saved face for everyone and further cemented their alliance. And with that, I was rendered completely and utterly irrelevant. The days that followed were a blur of pain and power. I was barred from the healing chambers, a spectator in my own mate's resurrection. The rituals, conducted by Malachi and supported by the steadfast presence of Orion's daughter, were grueling. Ryker's roars of agony would echo through the keep, a sound that tore at the edges of my soul. I was haunted by the knowledge that I should have been the one by his side, my loyalty the balm to his pain. Instead, a stranger was taking my place. Then, one evening, a different sound came from the chamber. It was a low, rumbling growl, a sound I hadn't heard in months, a sound that vibrated with a primal power that had been dormant for too long. A crowd had gathered at the entrance, and a hushed, reverent whisper spread through the pack like wildfire. The doors opened. Malachi and Jackson emerged first, supporting Ryker between them. He was drenched in sweat, his face pale and etched with exhaustion, but he was on his own 2 feet. He took a single, faltering step, then another. The pack let out a collective, choked gasp. As he took his first tentative steps into the great hall, he lifted his head and his eyes. His eyes glowed with the faint, returning light of his wolf. That single moment changed everything. Word of his miraculous recovery and the Sunstone Alliance spread through the territories like a storm. He was no longer the broken Alpha, the object of pity and scorn. He was Ryker the Reborn, the Alpha who had faced death, sacrificed his wolf, and risen from the ashes more powerful than before. His legend grew with every passing day, a mythic tale of honor, sacrifice, and divine favor. My pack, which had been fractured and fearful, now rallied around their rising Alpha with a fanatical devotion. His every word was law, his every glance a command. They saw the wealth pouring in from the Sunstone mines, the elite warriors from Orion's pack reinforcing our borders. They saw a future not just of survival, but of greatness. And at the center of it all was Ryker, his strength growing daily, his limp fading, the golden light in his eyes burning brighter and brighter. He was destined for greatness, and I, the Luna who had abandoned him in the dark, was now nothing more than a ghost in the blinding light of his new dawn. Chapter 11. The blinding light of Ryker's new dawn cast a long and lonely shadow, and I was trapped within it. Every cheer from the pack, every report of our newfound wealth, every glimpse of my mate standing taller and stronger, was another nail in the coffin of my old life. The comfort I had found with Silas had evaporated under the pack's scorn, leaving behind only the bitter taste of shame. I was irrelevant, a ghost haunting a future I had willingly thrown away, and I was desperate. That desperation fueled a last reckless gamble, a final pathetic attempt to reclaim my throne. I chose my moment carefully, waiting until Ryker was holding council in the Great Hall, surrounded by the symbols of his new power. Warriors from the Sunstone Pack, chests filled with gold tributes, maps of his new territory. I walked into the hall, and a hush fell over the assembly. Every eye turned to me. I ignored them, my gaze fixed only on the man standing by the Alpha's throne. He was no longer the broken man in the wheelchair. He was every inch the king I had forgotten he could be. I fell to my knees before him, the stone floor cold against my skin. I summoned every ounce of skill I possessed, every fake tear, every practiced tremor in my voice. The mate bond. It called me home. I wept, lifting my eyes to his, trying to project a lifetime of feigned remorse. Ryker, I was lost. I was drowning in your pain, and I made a terrible mistake. I was a fool. I spoke of destiny, of the moon goddess's mysterious ways, of second chances. I painted a picture of a lost, terrified Luna, not a disloyal one. I begged him to remember the love we once shared, the life we had built, the daughter who needed her family whole. Please, I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears that I willed into existence. Don't let my weakness poison our future. I see the truth now. I see you. Ryker watched me, his face a cold, unreadable mask. There was no flicker of the old warmth, no hint of forgiveness. He was simply observing my performance with the detached curiosity of a predator watching its prey. From a pouch at my waist, I pulled out the official rejection papers, the ones we never signed. My hands trembled as I held them out to him, the ultimate symbol of my supposed surrender. Tear them up, my love, I pleaded, my voice dropping to a desperate whisper, unable to keep the hungry gleam from my eyes as I glanced at the gold, at the power that now surrounded him. Please, Ryker, let's burn the past. Let us be a family again. The papers lay in my outstretched hands, a fragile bridge between the ruin of my present and the glorious future I was trying to steal back. His decision, his single action would determine everything. He looked from the papers to my face, his golden wolf eyes seeming to pierce through every lie, every calculation, and for the first time, I felt a tremor of true, undiluted fear. Chapter 12. My plea hung in the air, a desperate, shimmering lie. Ryker stared at the rejection papers in my hand, his face a mask of utter stillness. For a terrifying second, I thought I saw a flicker of the man I once knew, a hint of indecision. But then his gaze lifted from my face and settled on something behind me. I followed his line of sight, and my blood ran cold. Standing near the edge of the council, half hidden behind Jackson's leg, was our daughter, Willow. She was watching us, her small face a heartbreaking mix of fear and fragile hope. Ryker's eyes met mine again, and whatever softness I thought I'd seen was gone, replaced by a final, chilling clarity. He took the papers from my trembling hand. My heart leaped, a wild, stupid thing, believing for a single, insane moment that he was going to tear them up. Instead, he turned to his beta. Jackson, your pen. Jackson produced a pen, his movements sharp and precise. Ryker took it, the simple object looking like a weapon in his hand. You were right about one thing, Aspen, he said, his voice cold and clear, each word a perfectly aimed arrow into the heart of my deception. A strong pack needs a whole wolf. He paused, his golden eyes now blazing with the full fire of his reborn wolf, boring into me. And a strong wolf needs a whole heart. With a deliberate, fluid flourish, he signed his name on the line. The ink seemed to sizzle on the parchment, glowing for a moment with the raw power of his alpha authority. The moment the signature was complete, our mate bond, the sacred connection that had defined my entire life, didn't just break, it shattered. It turned to ash and dust inside my soul, leaving a void so vast and empty it stole the breath from my lungs. A choked, strangled gasp escaped my lips as the spiritual foundation of my world ceased to exist. I collapsed, not from a feigned swoon, but from the genuine, soul-crushing shock of my absolute defeat. My gamble had failed. My life as Luna was over. I was nothing. As I knelt on the cold stone floor, gasping in the empty space where my bond used to be, a graceful figure moved past me. It was Alpha Orion's daughter, the beautiful she-wolf who had stood in for me during the healing rituals. She was radiant, her eyes filled with a strength and honor I knew I'd never possess. She stopped before Ryker and offered him a respectful, dignified bow. "My father sends his congratulations on your recovery, Alpha Ryker," she said, her voice like clear bells, full of genuine admiration. She rose, a confident and genuine smile on her face, and his proposal for a more permanent alliance. Ryker looked at her, and for the first time in an eternity, a real, true smile touched his lips. It was a smile I had been starving for, a smile I would never receive again. He looked from her to our daughter, Willow, who was now tentatively smiling back, and then he looked past me as if I were nothing more than a ghost, a bad memory already fading. He was looking at his new life, a future of gold, power, and loyalty, a future that did not include me. And with that, the story of Aspen and the Alpha Reborn comes to an end. Thank you so much for following this journey of heartbreak, betrayal, and ultimate redemption from start to finish. If you enjoyed watching this story unfold, please show your support and like this video. To make sure you don't miss the next epic romance we have planned, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. And if you know someone who loves a story with powerful karma, do them a favor and share this complete story with them. Your support helps us bring more of these worlds to life. Thank you again for listening. We can't wait to see you in the next one.